recognizes the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Trott, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here. You know, Commissioner, you've had an extraordinary career. Head of the Soccer Foundation, head of Duke University Board, executive chairman at Freddie Mac, deputy mayor of D.C., deputy director of OMB, ran a large turnaround company, was in charge of Y2K for the entire country, clerked for the chief judge for the D.C. Circuit, worked at Gibson and Dunn, Duke, Yale, Cambridge, just an extraordinary record. You said earlier that you're proud of your record at the IRS. I'm not so sure I agree. You came in with two big tasks in front of you. One, the Lois Lerner investigation, and two, to restore the confidence in the American people that their First Amendment rights weren't being compromised by the IRS. And we've heard quite a bit today about our concern with respect to both of those challenges. But let me ask you a hypothetical. When you were the executive chairman of the Freddie Mac board, if the president and CEO of Freddie Mac, he lied under oath to Congress or repeatedly misstated important facts or repeatedly was uninformed of decisions being made by surrogate or subordinates regarding the mortgage crisis, what would you have done?
If he lied under oath to the Congress, we would have considered appropriate disciplinary action, which might have included termination.
If the president of Duke University, when they were doing the investigation into the scandal of the lacrosse team, if he had lied or if he had misstated key facts or if he was otherwise uninformed on what the subordinates were doing with respect to that investigation, what would you have done when you were the chair of the Duke board?
Well, if he was performing in good faith, you're talking about did he intentionally either mislead or obstruct issues?
Just gross incompetence, let's call it. Let's not say perjury. Let's just say gross incompetence, unaware of the investigation, unaware of the facts, misstating the facts consistently. What would you have done?
At that point, in fact, we'd have a discussion, but that doesn't sound like he intentionally. If he was totally unaware, then you would have a serious question. This is not a situation where the head of the organization was totally aware by any stretch.
This is not a hypothetical. Let me ask you a more recent set of facts. So yesterday, Senator Warren was screaming at the CEO of Wells Fargo for what happened there to their customers. And I think it's indefensible what happened there. And she called, I think she screamed it several times. He needs to resign. Do you think the CEO of Wells Fargo should resign?
Not a decision for me to make, but the distinction is people at Wells Fargo knew for the last couple of years about that problem. No one at the IRS knew about the erasure of those tapes. This is not a situation where people knew something and were covering it up. Every time we spent a significant amount of time trying to provide all the information we had.
So you think the CEO of Wells Fargo knew about what was happening?
That's all I know is what I read in the newspapers, and my understanding is that the question was that people knew 2 or 3 years ago.
People or the CEO?
I haven't read the details, so I can't tell you for sure. Again, to the best of my knowledge, I don't know the details.
We've heard a lot today from some of the Democratic members of the committee that this whole hearing is an embarrassment and we should apologize. And here are the facts as I know them. People are afraid of the IRS. The IRS was used as a political tool under the Nixon administration and now the Obama administration. You were brought in to solve this problem, and under your watch, the problem got a lot worse, either because you committed perjury or because you were consistently misinformed regarding critical facts in the investigation, or you were unaware of what your subordinates were doing. Now, we both know, and I spent 30 years in the private sector, we both know in the private sector, the head of the organization with those facts in front of you, they would have been fired or they would have resigned. And so when the Dems say this is a charade and a game, and you could say the same about a lot of things here in Washington, but my question to you is, what should I go home on Friday and tell my constituents who are afraid of the IRS and who are disgusted by Washington? Because what happens when these facts are presented in Washington is either people lie, they cover up, or we have to say, well, you know, we have to expect some level of incompetence from the federal government. That's why Washington's a mess. What should I tell my constituents about what's going on at the IRS and how, under your tenure, this investigation played out? Please give me an answer.
The answer to that is no one lied, no one covered up. And, in fact, the base issue, the mismanagement that led to the totally improper designation of organizations by their names has stopped, notwithstanding the issue that there are 3 that have litigated and have not been decided. We are actually resolving those. So I think the answer is no one lied, no one covered up, and in fact we take very seriously the obligation to make sure that every taxpayer no matter their political party, their beliefs, whether they go to church or not, whatever they do deserves to be treated and needs to be treated, and that's our obligation to treat them fairly.
But, sir, you'd have to agree with me, in the private sector, the head of that organization probably wouldn't have survived. Would you agree with that statement?
On these facts, the head of that organization would survive.
I respectfully disagree. Thank you again for your time, and I have to say, I'm surprised that you haven't resigned, because with your extraordinary career, I think there's a part of you, if you disagree with a lot of what we're doing here today, would want to say, gosh, I just don't need this, and you'd move on and do something else, but I appreciate you being here.
I appreciate that. As I've said, if I could, Mr. Chairman,
The answer.
I have not resigned, A, because I don't think anything has been done that would merit that. B, after all of the tugging and hauling and pushing over the last year and a half, my concern is if I am in fact forced out and I left, it will simply create a terrible precedent trying to recruit people from the private sector as I came, on the ground that people can make allegations that are not necessarily subject to a full investigation, can simply make allegations charging you that with threats of impeachment or censure, and a lot of people are going to say, why should I risk my career or my reputation to do public service in that context? So my sense is we need to get to closure on this because I don't think impeachment is proper, and we need to demonstrate to people you can come into public service and you have an obligation to the taxpayers. You spend taxpayer money. You have an obligation to do your best and perform well. And in some cases, as we noted, there's on the Oversight Committee list, there are 18 out of 20 that they have so-called targeted that have left. And if you can't meet the expectations, you don't make progress, then you shouldn't be there. But I said the total record here is not just C4s where we have solved that problem. The total record over the last 3 years is the IRS and its employees have made tremendous progress dealing with a wide range of issues, and I'm proud of the record.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from